She thought it was just a headache. What doctors discovered will haunt you forever. It began on a seemingly normal Thursday. The kind of day when the sun hangs high, casting warm rays over the sleepy town of Maplewood. But for Karen, that day spiraled into chaos. Her head throbbed, a dull ache at first. She brushed it off. Just a headache, right? Little did she know, that ache was heralding something far more sinister. Each pulse felt like a warning, rippling through her skull. Karen rubbed her temples, desperate for relief. But with every minute, the pain twisted deeper, a vice tightening around her mind. She couldn't shake the growing sense that something wasn't right. It wasn't just a headache, it was as if something was unfurling inside of her, a dark creature slowly awakening from a deep slumber. Strange visions danced around the edges of her sight. Flickers of shadow, whispers like biting wind, clawing at her sanity. Was she losing her grip? Heart racing, she turned to her husband, Kyle, who watched her with concern etched across his features. "You don't look good, hon, maybe we should head to the doctor." But fear held her back. Going to the doctor felt too real, too final. What were they going to find? Could they even help her? The questions clawed at her mind. The more she thought, the worse the headache became. Hours slipped by, and those shadows grew denser, buzzing like angry bees. It was no longer just a headache, it felt like a portal opening to something terrifying. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The clock ticked ominously, echoing in the quiet house. Karen finally succumbed to the dread pooling in her stomach and agreed to visit the hospital. As they arrived, the sterile smell of antiseptic hit her like a slap. Nurses buzzed around, their faces a blend of calm professionalism and unseen chaos. Dr. Harper, a tall man with sharp features, greeted them. His voice held a mix of authority and urgency. "Let us get you checked out. We want to make sure it's nothing serious." The concern in his eyes made her heart race. What was lurking beneath that friendly facade? After tests and scans, the air thickened with tension. Karen's mind raced. What would they uncover? Fear clutched her tightly, as tight as the pain shooting through her skull. She caught snippets of conversations as other patients shuffled past. "Did you hear about that woman who?" a nurse whispered just loud enough for Karen to catch. Her ears perked up, the faint murmur felt like a sinister signal. Just then, the door creaked open, and Dr. Harper stepped in, his expression grave and unreadable. "There's something we need to discuss," he said slowly, locking eyes with her. What could it be? Her breath hitched, and a lump formed in her throat. Was it serious? Was it life-changing? Or worse? Karen's mind raced ahead, desperate for anything. The shadows whispering in her ears begged her not to ask. Would she be able to handle the truth? The silence in the room felt suffocating. Karen's heart hammered wildly in her chest, each beat echoing her dread. Dr. Harper took a deep breath, as if steeling himself to deliver a heart-wrenching confession. "Karen," he began, his voice low and steady, "the tests have shown something unusual in your scans." The words hung heavy in the air, twisting like a knife in her gut. "We found a tumor." The world around her spun. The walls seemed to close in, and the cold floor felt too far away. A tumor? Those whispered shadows crept closer, enveloping her with their dark hands. What does that mean?" She stammered, her throat dry, fear coursing through her veins like ice. "We need to perform further tests, biopsies, MRIs, but right now, it's crucial that we monitor your condition," he replied briskly, but his gravity-laden tone revealed his concern. Kyle's hand tightened around hers, grounding her just as it felt like she might float away entirely. Fear was painted across his face, a stark reflection of her own internal chaos. "Can you treat it?" he asked, his voice trembling. Dr. Harper hesitated, his brow furrowing. "It's too early to tell. We need to see what kind of tumor this is and how advanced it is." Each word crashed over her like a giant wave. Advanced. She could barely breathe under the weight of it. The air felt thick, the facility bustling with life suddenly turned quiet, as if all existence revolved around her devastating reality. Karen felt the heat of tears prick her eyes, blurring her vision. She fought against them, she had always been strong. Hadn't she? But how could she face this? Her life, her future, everything she had hoped for hanging in delicate balance, like a shattered glass ornament ready to fall apart. "Can we get a second opinion?" she managed to whisper. "Of course," Dr. Harper replied quickly. "That's always an option, Karen. But I want you to think about your next step seriously. We're here to help." With that, he turned to leave. Karen's heart dropped further. Help. Their lives had been intertwined with the idea of a normal future: dinner plans, quiet evenings, laughter shared. How could any of it happen now? Fighting against despair, she glanced at Kyle, searching for that flicker of hope, just a glimmer to hold on to. But his face was etched with the same shades of fear she felt inside. As they sat together in the sterile room, their hands intertwined, panic began to surge. What if the whispers were true? What if shadows were gathering, preparing to consume her? More tests loomed ahead, but she couldn't shake the feeling of impending doom. Each moment stretched, heavy as if they were suspended in time, waiting for the doctor's return. And then, someone across the hall shouted, drawing her attention. Unexpected panic seized her as she squinted through the glass panel. A nurse hurried past carrying a clipboard, rushing to respond to a scream that echoed across the waiting room. Heart racing, Karen's mind spiraled down a dark tunnel. What if this was her future? "Karen." Kyle's gentle voice pulled her back. "Stay with me." His eyes were filled with urgency, a plea for strength. But the shadows threatened to pull her away again. What if it's bad? The door creaked open, and a nurse rushed in, urgency radiating from her. Karen's breath quickened. Did it have to do with her? With what lay inside her? "Mrs. Walker." The nurse said, her tone clipped but somehow comforting. "You need to come with me. There's a situation." For a moment, the room clattered around her, grasped in a state of chaos. Would she ever be able to escape this nightmare, or was she destined to dive deeper into the darkness? What situation awaited her just beyond that door? The shadows whispered louder now, eagerness igniting beneath their weight. Would she emerge from this abyss or be consumed entirely? The nurse's eyes were a mix of urgency and something Karen couldn't quite place. She stepped forward, pulling Karen out of her muddled thoughts. "Right this way, please." Karen's heart raced as she rose to her feet, Kyle's grip on her hand a reassuring anchor. "What is going on?" she asked, the tremor in her voice betraying her calm facade. The nurse exchanged a glance with Kyle before nodding. "Just follow me," the nurse insisted, her tone firm yet gentle. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead as they stepped into the hallway, the sterile scent of antiseptic burning in Karen's nostrils. She could hear muffled voices and the distant beeping of monitors, a cacophony that seemed to mock her rising dread. They stopped outside a small cramped room. The nurse opened the door and gestured for Karen to enter. She hesitated. The shadows felt thicker in here, pressing against her skin like a weight. "Can't Kyle come in with me?" she asked, fear creeping into her voice. "Just for a minute," the nurse replied softly, her eyes softening. "I promise he'll be right here." With a heavy heart, Karen stepped inside. The room was dimly lit, cluttered with medical equipment. A doctor she hadn't seen before was busy jotting down notes on a chart. Karen felt a wave of anxiety crash over her as she took a seat on the edge of the examination table. "Mrs. Walker, I'm Dr. Martinez," the doctor said, looking up and meeting her gaze. His voice was calm, but the tension in the air was suffocating. "I understand you've been informed about your test results." "Yes," Karen replied, her heart pummeling against her chest. I have a tumor." Dr. Martinez nodded slowly, folding his arms. "We're here to discuss the next steps, but first, I need to assess your symptoms further. Have you experienced any unusual headaches or dizziness?" Karen felt a lump in her throat. "Just some headaches. They've been different lately." "Different how?" He pressed, his eyes searching hers for the truth, for a sign that there was hope tucked somewhere beneath the fear. "It's like they're sharper," she said, shaking her head as if trying to dislodge the memories. "Almost like someone's squeezing my skull." "Do they occur at certain times?" he asked, writing furiously on his clipboard. "I thought they were stress-related. Just working too much." Each word was a struggle, breaking the surface of truth while dredging up the murky waters of guilt. Dr. Martinez paused, letting silence envelop the room. "Karen, symptoms can vary widely with brain tumors. It's crucial we rule out any further complications." Her throat went dry as she tried to process his words. "What complications?" But before he could answer, the door burst open, and another nurse entered, looking pale. "Doctor, we have an urgent situation in the emergency room," she said breathlessly. Karen's chest tightened. "Emergency room?" The fear of the unknown flooded back, swallowing any shred of composure she had left. Dr. Martinez shot a glance at Karen before rising swiftly. "Stay here," he instructed, urgency punctuating each word. "I'll be right back." The door closed behind him, leaving Karen alone within the walls of uncertainty. Time seemed to slow, each tick of the clock a reminder of the chaos that was spiraling out of control around her. Memories of mundane mornings, coffee dates, and simple laughter flashed by moments that risked being snuffed out. What was happening in the emergency room? Would she find the answers she so desperately sought, or was this just the beginning of something far worse? Karen's thoughts raced, and as panic began to rise again, shadowy figures danced at the edges of her mind. A blonde nurse swung back through the door, eyeing her sympathetically. "You're not in this alone," she whispered softly, but Karen couldn't shake the looming darkness. Just then, a distant shout echoed from down the hall. It was a voice filled with desperation, a frantic call that chilled her to the bone. What if this wasn't just about Karen anymore? What if the situation was worse than she ever imagined? The sounds of footsteps echoed in the hallway, sharp and commanding. Karen strained her ears, the shout from earlier still reverberating in her mind. Paranoia nipped at her heels like a restless ghost. A moment later, the nurse returned, her face now devoid of any semblance of calm. "Ms. Walker, I need you to answer some questions." Her voice, usually steady, trembled now. The urgency clung to the air like fog. What is going on?" Karen demanded, her heart hammering against her ribs. She felt the very walls of the room contracting, too close, suffocating. "There's been a situation in the ER that could affect it might affect you," the nurse stammered, averting her eyes as if the truth was too heavy to bear. "We need to keep you safe." "Safe?" Karen swallowed hard, her throat dry again. She felt the dread peel back the skin on her scalp, sending electric shivers down her spine. "What do you mean? Please just answer me. Have you experienced any sudden movements, confusion, or perhaps any recent memory loss?" The nurse's gaze was pleading, wide with fear. "No." It shot out of her before she could stop it. But confusion began to creep in as if it were patiently waiting for its turn. "I mean, I've felt dizzy, but I thought it was just stress." The nurse's brow furrowed deeper. Stress can worsen symptoms, but this, she hesitated. "We just need to be certain." Before Karen could ask what this entailed, Dr. Martinez burst into the room again, his expression grim. He looked at Karen, then at the nurse. Urgency burned like a spotlight in his eyes. "Karen, we have a potential case, a severe one. A patient who might have been exposed to something significant." Her stomach dropped. "What kind of exposure?" "Contagious," he breathed, the air thick with tension. "We can't take any chances. You're at risk just by being here." Karen's breathing quickened, fear cracking through her focus. "What are you saying?" "Symptoms can present in many forms," Dr. Martinez said, his tone clipped. "We need to move you to isolation." "I should have done this sooner." "Isolation?" Confusion and dread swirled into a terrifying cocktail of anxiety. "What about Kyle?" "I can't leave him." The nurse's hand shot up, silencing her. "We'll alert him. He needs to stay in the waiting area for now." "Karen." Kyle's voice cut through the air like a knife. He appeared in the doorway, his face pale, eyes wild with worry. "What is going on?" "I heard the commotion." "Stay back." The nurse waved him off, but Karen could see the panic ricocheting through Kyle. "They're moving her to isolation." "Isolation?" Kyle repeated, disbelief morphing his face. "Why?" "There's a risk of exposure," Dr. Martinez stated flatly, his gaze fixed on Karen. "Trust us, it's for your safety." Her heart sank like lead. Safety from what? A shrill alarm blared from the hallway, cutting through the tension, freezing them in place. "Code blue in the ER." A voice boomed over the intercom. "All available personnel report immediately." "Go." The nurse urged, pushing everyone on instinct. Karen felt herself slipping away, confusion clouding her logic. Desperation clawed at her throat. "I need to see Kyle." She fought against the rush, but the grip of the nurses was swift. Just as they pulled her back, Kyle pressed through, his eyes locked onto hers, fear etched into every feature. "I want to let them take you," he shouted, desperation thick in his voice. The world around her melted away, the sounds of the hospital fading into a distant hum. "Get the tests done," Dr. Martinez ordered, and the frantic pace of the scene heightened. Karen's heart raced. She was trapped in a whirlwind of chaos and confusion, but one thought anchored her in place: what happened in the ER? The nurse's grip tightened, leading her away as she turned one last time to Kyle, who stared back, a flicker of rage and fear illuminating his expression. "Karen!" His shout echoed, desperate, a lifeline reaching for her in the dark. And all Karen could think was, what awaited her in isolation? As they pushed open the door and darkness loomed ahead, a chilling question crawled into her mind: was she about to become just another patient caught in a sinister web? As the door swung closed behind her, the muffled cries of Kyle faded into a haunting silence. Karen was ushered into the isolation room, a stark space that felt more prison than safety center. The walls were a washed-out pale blue, and the only sound was the sharp hiss of the ventilation system, punctuating her rising panic. She shivered as she was directed to sit on the small, sterile bed, just a thin mattress on a metal frame. The nurse seemed averted, her hurried movements causing a flurry of turbulence that Karen couldn't quite understand. Every breath felt shallow, as if the air was thickened with fear. "Just a few more tests," the nurse said, glancing at Karen. There was a tightness around her mouth that betrayed her own anxiety. "Why can't I see Kyle?" Karen's voice trembled, desperation clawing at her throat. "I have to talk to him. You can't keep me in here." "Ms. Walker, please," the nurse responded, her tone brisk but not unkind. "It's for your own safety. We need to get results first." Before she could protest further, a sharp knock on the door interrupted them. Dr. Martinez re-entered, his expression foreboding. "Karen, we're going to run some tests now," he said firmly, his voice dropping just enough for her to feel the weight of his concern. "I need you to cooperate." "Tests?" The thought sent her heart racing again. Each word dripped with implications that made her skin winter cold. "What kind of tests?" she asked, urgency creeping in. Blood tests, saliva samples, and we'll need to monitor your vitals closely. He paused, his eyes narrowing, as if weighing whether to reveal more. We need to know if you have been exposed to something compromising. Compromising? Like? She couldn't finish her sentence. The way he avoided her gaze felt like a shroud of anxiety wrapping tightly around her chest. The patient in the ER had symptoms similar to a severe neurological condition, he finally admitted, forcing the words out. We don't have all the information yet, but people have become confused. Some have lost their memory. We need to be certain you haven't been affected. The ground beneath her shaped into quicksand. Confused? Memory loss? It felt surreal, like a nightmare she hadn't wanted to wake from. Could it really happen to her? A series of electrical beeps filled the room as the nurse attached sensors to her chest. Just breathe, Karen. We'll get through this, she said, but her voice quivered, and Karen felt the soft tremor in her words, breathe. Karen clutched the edge of the bed, channeling every ounce of resolve into staying still and composed. This couldn't be happening, there had to be a logical explanation. Did anyone else show symptoms? She asked, a tremor of urgency underlining her voice. What about Kyle? Is he okay? Before either of them could answer, the overhead lights flickered violently, plunging the room into momentary darkness. Oh no, the nurse gasped, recovering quickly. Stay calm. A frantic commotion erupted outside the room. Voices shouted instructions, hurried footsteps thundered down the hallway. Something serious was happening. Is there another emergency? Karen's heart raced as she shot glances toward the door, panic amplifying in her chest. Dr. Martinez shared a quick, tense look with the nurse. Stay put. We need to assess what is going on, he said, but his tone suggested uncertainty. Just as a cold, icy fear began to creep under her skin, a voice outside called out, we need all units in the break room now. Fear ripped through her veins. This wasn't just about her anymore, the entire hospital was in chaos. Was the contagion spreading? Suddenly, a scream pierced the air, a high-pitched terror that echoed like thunder in her ears. What was that? Karen shrieked, terror flooding every inch of her body. The nurse stood rigid, eyes wide. I don't know, what were they hiding? What awaited her not just in isolation but outside the thin walls of her small prison? A gut-wrenching realization clawed at her, she was not simply a patient anymore. She was a potential victim caught in something far more sinister than she had ever imagined. And as the chaos escalated outside her door, Karen knew she had to figure it out before it consumed her. The darkness that loomed outside was not just threatening, it was beckoning her closer to a revelation much more terrifying than she could fathom. Would she still be herself when this was all over? The sharp scream echoed in Karen's ears, but the silence that followed was deafening. She could hear her heart pounding, each beat resonating with fear and confusion. What could cause such terror? Stay calm, Dr. Martinez instructed, though the tremor in his voice betrayed the facade of confidence. As he stepped toward the door, Karen caught a glimmer of panic in his eyes, a fleeting glimpse of his own fear. What is happening? She demanded, her voice a mix of desperation and urgency. He hesitated, stealing a glance at the nurse before turning back to her. We're investigating an outbreak. We believe it's linked to the patient in the ER. I need to, but before he could finish, another scream shattered the air, more frantic than the last, and it sliced through Karen's sanity. The nurse's hands shook as she fumbled with the machines monitoring Karen's vitals. This isn't good, she muttered under her breath, brow furrowing in concern. Panic surged within Karen. She was trapped, alone in this sterile room with a rising storm just outside the door. What if whatever was happening out there was already trying to claw its way in here? Dr. Martinez. You have to let me out of here. Karen shouted, listening to the chaos unraveling beyond those thin walls. Her mind raced with thoughts of Kyle. Would she lose him, too? The doctor finally opened the door, revealing a scene that made her blood run cold. Shadows moved frantically in the flickering hallway lights, their labored voices creating a cacophony of chaos. They were working to contain something that felt more primal than illness. "Karen, I'll be right back," he said, stepping outside. "No. Don't leave me," she cried, but he was already gone, leaving her in isolation, her thoughts spiraling into darkness. Time stretched infinitely. She swallowed hard, trying to suppress the rising tide of nausea. Panic clawed at her throat, constricting her airways. Then she heard it, a low growl that seemed to swell from the depths of the hospital. Her breathing quickened. It sounded like an animal. No, worse, a person, caught in a frenzy of fear and pain. The nurse, meanwhile, was tapping at her phone, her face a mask of concentration. "What's wrong? Who's hurt?" Karen pressed, but the nurse merely shook her head, eyes glued to her screen. Then it happened. The lights flickered again, and this time they didn't just buzz, they extinguished in a shower of sparks. The room plunged into darkness, the only illumination coming from the eerie glow of the emergency exit signs. Karen's heart raced. Panic bubbled over. "Let me out!" she screamed, slamming her fists against the bed. Just then a loud crash sounded from the hallway, followed by shouts of distress. Someone was breaking through the chaos outside, and all she could do was sit there, frozen in fear. The nurse's fingers flew over her phone, but Karen swore she saw her flinch when another noise erupted, an echoing torment that sent shivers down Karen's spine. "What is happening?" Karen's voice quivered. The nurse finally turned, and her eyes were wide with unfathomable fear. I think they're losing control. We need to secure the premises." The reality sank in. The hospital wasn't safe, and every second pushed her closer to the brink of something horrific. Karen clenched her fists, her mind racing. Could she trust the nurse? Should she stay or find a way to escape? Before she could make a decision, a figure stumbled into the dim light, face twisted and grotesque, visibly shaken and disoriented. The person collapsed against the wall, gasping, and Karen's heart dropped. What had happened to them? The nurse took a step back, fear etched on her features. "We need to get out. Now." But where was there to go? A cold sweat ran down Karen's back. The dark secret lay beyond the walls, and they were running out of time. She got to her feet, her determination igniting. No one else would lose themselves if she could help it. She would fight for her mind, for Kyle's mind, for answers. A voice called out just beyond the door, urgent, demanding. "Is anyone in there?" Karen's breath caught in her throat. Who was it? Was it someone to help, or someone to hurt? She had to make a choice that could define everything. And as the figure paused, straining to listen to her answer, she realized this was just the beginning. What awaited her on the other side of that door? Would the truth shred her sanity into pieces, or could it save them all? Karen pressed her ear against the cold metal of the door, straining to make out more from the voice that had pierced the clamorous uncertainty. Is anyone in there? The urgency was palpable, simmering with desperation. But with every moment, the tension grew heavier, pressing down on her chest. The nurse beside her was now visibly shaking, a deep crease formed on her forehead. "We really need to get out of here," she whispered, casting glances over her shoulder, as if she expected the shadows to come alive. "Who is it?" Karen asked, her heart racing, feeling Panic's icy grip tighten. "Just answer." The voice called again, a man this time. "We're trying to secure the area. If you're in there, you need to get ready to evacuate." Evacuate? The word hung in the air like a bitter taste. They were even contemplating fleeing from this bed of sickness. Are they safe? Karen's voice trembled, unable to mask her fear. "I don't know." The nurse's voice cracked. "I can't leave you here, but we're running out of time." The chaos outside intensified, sounds of shattering glass and anguished screams erupted, mingling with the growl that still reverberated through the walls. Karen's instinct to flee surged once more. They needed to act before something worse smashed through their fragile barricade. Just let me see," Karen urged, her heart hammering against her ribcage. The light from the emergency exit sign flickered ominously, casting erratic shadows across the room. Before the nurse could protest, Karen turned the doorknob, anticipation surging through her. The door creaked ominously as it opened slightly, revealing nothing but darkness beyond. Her heart sank. "Stay back," the man's voice warned from just outside. "We have to," a shriek echoed down the hall, cutting him off. It was so raw, so filled with pain that it sent a jolt through her body. This wasn't just an epidemic, it felt like a scene from a waking nightmare. The nurse grabbed Karen's arm tightly, her eyes pleading. "We can't open it. We need to," but Karen wasn't listening anymore. She had already stepped further into the shadowy corridor, driven by an instinct she couldn't ignore. "Wait." Her heart raced, fueled by fear and the faint hope of finding help. The world outside was chaos, a whirlwind of panic, but she had to know. Were they really secure? Should she hang back in fear or push forward into an uncertain fate? As she slipped into the hallway, the air felt charged, thick with dread. She squinted into the abyss ahead, trying to make sense of the shadows, and there. A flicker of movement. The figure from earlier, no longer just disoriented but actively crawling toward her, dragging their body with all the agony of desperation. "Help," they whimpered, voice hoarse. Karen froze, her body betraying her. This wasn't someone who could aid her, it was a warning. The sight of the person twisted and torn filled her heart with dread. "Stay back," she shouted, adrenaline coursing through her. But it was too late. The hallway suddenly erupted with distant roars, and a throng of frantic footsteps echoed ominously behind her. In that moment, the want for survival sparked within. She couldn't hold back, she had to move. Karen turned to retreat but collided with the nurse who was now at her side, eyes wide with terror. "We have to go now." They bolted, desperation fueling their flight. The corridor suddenly felt endless, each step echoing like a countdown to calamity. The flickering lights overhead snapped violently, casting them into strobe-like flashes. They were nearing a stairwell, its exit promised safety, but something deep within Karen twisted as a horrible thought crept in. What if the very thing they were running from was already waiting for them? Without warning, a figure surged from the darkness, lunging toward them, eyes wild and alive with madness. Karen's breath caught. What had the outbreak unleashed on them? They darted left into a door marked "Staff Only," wrenching it open just as the figure behind them screeched in fury. Inside, the room was a disordered mess of medical equipment and stark fluorescent lights. In the center lay a collection of charts and notes scattered across the floor, clues, perhaps, or harbingers of despair. "What are we doing in here?" the nurse gasped, breathless. "We need answers." Karen scanned the room, and that's when she noticed a clipboard covered with frantic notes detailing symptoms. What she saw sent shivers down her spine. "Listen to this," she breathed, steeling herself. This was the moment of revelation. These aren't just illnesses. But before she could finish, the sound of something heavy smashing against the door shattered her thoughts, echoing with an ominous finality. The nurse grasped her arm urgently. "We can't stay here, Karen. We need to find another way." But just then, the lights flickered again, revealing a figure lurking in the corner, a face twisted with suffering, seething with rage. "What have we stumbled into?" Karen whispered, fear coiling tightly in her gut. Before she could react, the door burst open, and chaos flooded in. What was unleashed in the darkness? Would they find the truth, or was it too late? The door flew open, creaking horrifically as if the very hinges screamed at their trespass. A mass surged into the room, each figure cloaked in darkness and desperation, twisted faces reflecting the horrors they had witnessed. Karen stumbled back, her heart pounding like a relentless drum inside her chest. "No!" she gasped, shielding herself, but the nurse pushed her aside, urgency coursing through her veins. "Get back!" the nurse shouted to the newcomers. A tall figure with wild eyes lunged forward, his voice a frantic whisper. "We're not infected. We're just trying to survive." Karen's eyes darted between the terrified faces that crowded the dimly lit room, searching for something familiar, something safe. They were scared, she could see it in their trembling hands and wide eyes. "What's happening out there?" The words escaped her lips before she could catch herself, desperation spilling forth. A woman stepped forward, her breath hitching. "They're infected. People are turning, I saw it happen." Her voice, thin and quaking, cracked under the weight of what she described. "Turning?" Karen echoed, her mind racing. "Turning into what?" "Monsters," the woman murmured, eyes glistening with unshed tears. "They don't look human anymore. It's like something took over. I tried to help my husband, but he attacked me." Each of Karen's breaths came heavier, every second stretching painfully as dread enveloped her. The very fabric of their reality seemed to fray. She glanced at the clipboard lying on the floor. Those notes had to mean something, but the chaos consuming them blurred her thoughts. "Listen!" a new voice shouted above the whispers. "We have to barricade this door. They'll come for us, and we can't let them in." Karen's heart pounded a warning. "If they've turned, if what you say is true." Suddenly, a snap of bone echoed from beyond the door, followed by frantic scratching that made the hair on her arms stand upright. She could imagine nails clawing desperately against the smooth metal, a grotesque retaliation against their meager sanctuary. "Help!" snapped the nurse, eyes wide, her voice sharp as glass. "We can't just, I know." Karen interrupted, urgency slicing through her panic. "We need to use something to block the door. Quickly." In the ensuing chaos, they scrambled for anything solid. A metal cart, once used for medical supplies, was heaved against the door, groaning in protest. "More! More!" the woman shouted as she joined them, pushing with all her might. Together, they strained against the weight of their fear, the distant groans growing louder. What had they inadvertently summoned? Was this the end of everything they knew? As they wedged the cart against the door, the figures outside bellowed, voices warped and unnatural, sending chills racing down Karen's spine. Each shriek echoed their despair and loss. This was no ordinary outbreak, it was a collapse of humanity. Suddenly, the nurse yanked Karen's arm, pulling her toward the corner of the room where a dusty window stood cracked open against the blood-red sky. "We need to get out." "Are you insane?" Karen hissed, glancing nervously at the barricade they'd just secured. "What if they see us? They're not looking for escapees. They want in." The nurse urged, her eyes frantic. With another crash, a piece of the door ripped away, leaving splintered wood scattered across the floor like fallen soldiers. "Now!" shouted the woman, her voice bereft of calm, fear lending her strength. They scrambled toward the window, the hunt overtaking them. The world outside had transformed into a living nightmare, a twisted reflection of their own desperation. Karen saw shadows darting among the debris, grotesque figures prowling with hunger in their eyes. A flicker of recognition pricked her mind. These were once people like them. With shaking hands, she tried to shove the window open. It creaked stubbornly, as if resisting their escape. The noise from behind them rose in a crescendo, the door risking its bonds under relentless assault. "Please. Just a little more." the nurse wailed, pushing Karen aside, frantic with panic. The window finally jerked open, a narrow escape framed against the horror that awaited them. But before Karen could leap forward, she caught a glimpse of the last figure flooding through the broken door, eyes wide and desperate, their gaze locking onto her with a chilling familiarity. "No," she whispered, dread pooling in her stomach. "It can't be." The urgency slammed back into her, driving her toward the window, but a fleeting thought clung to her mind. What if they left only to discover there was no safety beyond? As they clamored toward freedom, the air thick with despair and urgency. One question reverberated loudly in Karen's mind: was anyone truly safe from the darkness that crept closer every second? Just as she was about to leap through, a hand shot out, gripping her wrist with an iron-like hold. As she turned back, terror clouded her vision. What awaited them outside? Would they find salvation or be consumed by the very horror they fled? The grip tightened, and for a split second, the chaotic din around Karen felt muted, fading into the background. She whipped her head around to face the figure that had caught her wrist. Dread pooled deeper within her as recognition flooded her thoughts. Stephen. The name escaped her lips as a mere whisper, a breath of disbelief. The creature before her had once been her colleague, his usual calm demeanor replaced by a feral glaze that shattered any semblance of humanity. The blood caking his uniform, the wild look in his eyes. It wasn't him anymore. "Help me, Karen," he rasped, the plea sounding raw and desperate. "I'm trapped." The others around her surged back from the door, horror flashing across their faces as Stephen staggered forward, jaws clenching and muscles twitching. She felt a rush of conflicting emotions: fear, compassion, and overwhelming sorrow. "No. He's not himself," shouted the nurse, horrified. "Get away from him." Karen's heart broke at the sight. A memory flickered: Stephen sharing laughs during lunch breaks, his advice on difficult cases, the way he always seemed to have an answer. But now, he was just a fragment of that person, a broken reflection twisted by the chaos outside. "Please," he begged again, his voice tinged with desperation. "I can still help you. We can leave together, just like old times." The barricaded door creaked ominously, the pressure increasing as something outside thrust itself against the weakened barrier. A standoff, a moment suspended in time. Could she abandon him? "Don't listen to him," the tall figure from before shouted, his voice frantic and panicked. "He's infected. He'll turn on you." But as fear coursed through her, adrenaline thrummed louder. Would Stephen really attack her? He had been terrified, just like them, hadn't he? The nurse's eyes were bright with urgency. "Karen, we can't afford to waste time. We need to go, now." A twisted part of her wanted to believe him. She could still see the small flicker of hope within his eyes, the fleeting connection that once brought them together as colleagues. The world outside was chaos and fear, but here was a familiar form in the midst of this new nightmare. "Join us. We can escape together. Just let me through," he implored, desperation thickening his voice. The door groaned loudly again, demanding her attention. It was a battle against time. Would she break her resolve and save a man who was slipping away from them? Or would she protect herself and those who remained grounded in reality? Suddenly, the nurse flung herself back toward Karen, eyes wide, her breath hitching. "Get out now. We can't stay here." Before she could fully grasp the enormity of the choice ahead, the door gave way with a thunderous crash. Splinters flew into the air as grotesque forms spilled into the room. Shadows lunged toward them, shrieks of rage and grief mingling in a horrific symphony of terror. Panic surged, and Karen knew she had only seconds. She ripped her hand away from Stephen's grasp, shaking her head as she backed toward the window. "I'm sorry, Before she could finish, a blood-curdling shriek split the air as the first monstrous figure lunged, desperate to claim whatever prey it could grasp. "Karen!" Stephen cried out, desperation fueling his voice. "Don't leave me." But there was no time. The horror they had summoned had arrived, and nothing would remain the same. They climbed through the window, the world outside revealing itself as a battlefield, chaos reigning supreme. But bolting forward, Karen felt a deep urge to look back, her heart twisted in an unbearable knot. What had she left behind? Would they ever escape this nightmare? Would Stephen still be the man she once knew? In the fray, the air thickened with smoke and despair, and her mind raced with the haunting screams echoing from inside the room. As they stumbled into the outskirts of the carnage, a chilling realization struck her. There was nowhere to hide from what was coming. The outside world was no longer safe, and amid the chaos, something horrifying stirred within her, a realization creeping in that this nightmare might be just beginning. Who would turn next? And was their fate already sealed? Karen stumbled into the night, her heart racing, breathless with the echoes of chaos left behind. The moon hung high, casting a ghostly light over the wreckage of Maplewood, the town she'd known, now draped in shadows and desolation. Each step felt heavy, as if the weight of her choices bore down on her shoulders. They had escaped the madness of the hospital, but the reality outside was just as grim. The air was thick with fear, the distant screams merging into a symphony of agony. Karen clutched the nurse's hand tightly, her mind racing. Had they made the right choice by leaving Stephen behind? Would he too become a monster? "Where do we go now?" the nurse asked, her voice pleading and raw. The uncertainty in her eyes mirrored Karen's own. Panic clawed at her throat as they faced an empty street littered with debris. "Anywhere but here," Karen replied, the hasty decision ringing hollow as desperation surged. They pressed on, the shadows seemed to shift and pulse around them. Flickering streetlights made the night feel alive with danger. Every sound, a snap of a twig, a distant cry, sent impulses of fear coursing through Karen. The feeling of being hunted lurked close behind, whispers clawing at her sanity. Suddenly, a shadow darted from the alley, and they both froze. It was a figure wrapped in darkness, stumbling, its movements jerky and unsteady. "Stay back!" the nurse shouted, positioning herself protectively in front of Karen. The figure paused, the wild eyes behind light-stricken skin glimmered with recognition. "Help! Don't leave me!" it croaked, and Karen's heart twisted. There was a flicker of familiarity. "Kyle." She stepped forward, her voice cracking as she whispered his name. His face was pale, wild, but his eyes still held warmth. I thought I lost you," he gasped, trembling. "Are you okay?" Karen rushed to him, searching for signs of injury. "What happened? Are you hurt?" He shook his head, a hollow laugh escaping his lips. "No injuries, just everything's a mess. There are things out there, things that aren't right." The truth hung heavy between them, and she could see the fear etched into his features. "We need to regroup. Plan our next move. We can't stay in the open," he urged. The nurse nodded, glancing around for threats. "We should find shelter somewhere safe to hide and think. Then let us go," Kyle urged, his voice cutting through the fog of despair. They moved as one, retreating toward the old diner at the end of the block, its swinging door hanging ajar like an invitation into the unknown. Inside, the dim light revealed a scene frozen in time, tables overturned, scattered chairs, and shattered plates. It held the remnants of a simple life before the chaos enslaved them. Karen took a deep breath, trying to suppress the rising bile of fear. The three of them gathered in a corner booth, the shadows pressing in, palpably alive. Karen could feel the tension swirling around them, hopes, fears, doubts colliding like storm clouds. "What do we do?" the nurse asked, her voice barely a whisper. "They'll come looking for us," Kyle warned. "The infected, whatever this is. They're on the hunt." Karen's heart sank. The weight of the world sat heavy on her chest. "We need a plan," she said, clenching her fists on the formica table. "We can't just hide. If we let fear control us, we'll be trapped." "So what is the plan then?" the nurse asked, eyes darting around as they heard a distant commotion from outside, muffled roars and shouts looming closer. Her thoughts churned. "We need to find answers. We need to discover what is causing this chaos. There might still be survivors or a way to contain what is happening." Kyle's features hardened. "And if we don't find it? What if we get trapped out there?" Karen felt an ache deep within her, caught in a web of uncertainty. "We'll keep moving. We find people who know, who can help. But we can't take this lying down." Their discussion faded into silence as the din outside escalated. Karen felt the shadows creeping closer, tangible ghosts of the past returning to haunt her. She had left Stephen. Was he one of Those monsters now. Left behind to become what they once feared, without warning, a loud crash against the diner's door shattered the air. Breaching the barrier between safety and chaos, figures lurked outside, tortured expressions reflected in the broken glass. "They're here!" Kyle yelled, panic flooding his eyes. Karen's heart raced. "We've got to go now." She shot to her feet, urgency igniting every nerve. The three of them burst through the cafe's back entry, adrenaline coursing through their veins as they raced into the night, deeper into the chaos. The streets now filled with echoes, moans, and flickers of light danced in the periphery, a twisted carnival of despair. They ran farther away from the diner, weaving through alleyways guided only by instinct and fear. A siren split the air. It wailed continuously, a chilling reminder of the world that had caved in around them. They bounded around corners, breath heavy, eyes darting, always searching for something. "We can't keep running," Karen pleaded, the urgency squeezing around her heart. "There's a patch of woods just beyond the town," Kyle suggested, panting. "We can hide there until we can make sense of this." Karen nodded, her mind racing, grasping at the slivers of hope. They cracked through the tree line, the shadows of trees swallowing them whole as they fled deeper into the dark, the sound of chaos fading behind them. "What now?" The nurse breathed, slowing to a stop as they caught their breath. "Now we regroup, we find a way to survive this," Karen replied firmly. "But we do it together." As they stood in the trees, the darkness thick around them, Karen felt a surge of hope within her, a pulse of unyielding strength. Despite the horror they faced, they had one another. They would forge their path through the nightmares eclipsing the land, and as long as they had that, they could become stronger than the shadows that pursued them. In this fight for survival, they would push through the darkest night to find the dawn. Together, Karen whispered, determination coursing through her veins. Together, echoed Kyle and the nurse. The darkness consumed their surroundings, but it would not consume them. Not today. They would endure, marching forward into the unknown, undeterred by the monsters lurking both outside and within. Now was the time to find their strength. Now was the time to reclaim their humanity. You need to subscribe now, so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm. Your support is crucial. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about how this wild journey might end. And don't hesitate, instantly share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. This is the moment to show your support. Together, we'll navigate through this darkness.